First, let me say thank you, muito obrigado, for the opportunity to respond to the book, now published in translated into Portuguese. A little bit about the process of investigating oceans of grain. I started this project in a way 30 years ago, in 1985, when I discovered that the panic of 1873, a financial panic, wasn't really fully understood, and it became a kind of interest that stuck in the back of my mind for a very long time. I published a bunch of other books on other things, but I knew that there was an international history of this financial panic that primarily had to do with foreign grain, the international trade in grain, and how it changed, and the way in which it brought about these crises. I became fascinated by a person named Parvis who helped me understand this. I ended up doing research in Berlin, in Hamburg, in Amsterdam, in Antwerp, in Odessa, and many other places, London, the British Library, and it was there that I found the way of understanding how it is that wars are connected in many ways with problems of food provision. Well, I was not about the timing. I was surprised, even appalled, that the book came out 2 days before Putin invaded Ukraine. I had said in the book that Russia would never be a great power unless it controlled Ukraine. The Russian Empire was what I was talking about. But as you can imagine, many people took this as a kind of story about what Russia today wants. And I think it makes sense that there's a timeliness to this because Russia's long-term imperial plans have everything to do with the control of the Black Sea region, just as they had for the past 300 years. And so this is a timely story. It came out just as the invasion was happening. But in another sense, it's a very old story. It's a story that's over 300 years. That Russia's empire in the 17th, 18th, and 19th century had everything to do with the control of the Black Sea and the export of grain to the rest of the world. And in fact, the export of grain to the rest of the world goes all the way back, as I say in the book, to at least 1800 BC. About oil and the relationship between oil and grain. We should think about grain as being very much like oil. Oil is measured in calories. We measure oil in calories. We measure it as a kind of force for the provision of power. But before 1870, before steam engines were powered by gasoline and kerosene and things like that, and really before 1900 or so, before gasoline and kerosene were the primary sources of power for engines, we talked about power in terms of feeding people, feeding horses, and those sorts of things. And that power was measured in calories also. And it was primarily a story about grain. It was primarily a story about the provision of food as calories around the world and the ability to shrink that, to minimize that, to weaken an empire has everything to do with the ability to limit its access to grain, is what I argue in the book. And the greatest international powers, like Russia, like the United States, like Argentina much later, like Brazil arguably today, have everything to do with its ability to feed the rest of the world. And in the future, I think we're going to see this power of food being a crucial one in terms of understanding the world in the future as we face global warming, as we face catastrophe connected with climate change. The Portuguese edition, I love the fact that it is called The Wheat Wars. I wish that I had written that title for my book. When I finished the book, the publisher very much wanted it to have a kind of US focus, and so it became Oceans of Grain, How American Wheat Remade the World. But as the Portuguese translators understood, this is not a story about the United States. This is really a story about empires around the world, primarily in the 17, 18, and 1900s, all the way up until the period of the Russian Revolution. And it's a deeper story about how empires feed themselves and how empires are fed around the world. And that's, I think, why it's exciting to me that the Portuguese translation was Wheat Wars, which is much more directly connected to what the book is about. Again, Muito obrigado for having the chance to respond to these questions. Thank you so much.